Hello. Hey everyone, welcome to Street Tea. I know it's been a rough week, a lot of things going on, but I'm happy that we still got to have our broadcast, our time today, because today we're going to be talking about the voices of dissent. So, I just want to real quick, just to go over what that means, because I know we've been talking about that a lot lately. Street T has been posting posts and saying, we stand with Nick Cannon. A lot of things have been going on recently in current events and news around the world. So I just want to, just take the time and, talk a little bit about how, that works, because we are unfiltered voices here at Street T. That is, we are the home of the unfiltered voice. And that's the reason why, we show a lot of different things that are going on in current events, like, the protesters in Portland, Oregon, the things that are happening, and, even entertainment news. Sometimes that may not be as pleasant as we'd like it to be, but we all want to hear about certain things, so we report on that. And one of the things I've been sharing with you, is, the voices of dissent, people that are not agreeing. So, when we talk about the voice of dissent, we want to talk about racial profiling, okay? And that is what this is basically about. It's basically about the racial profile of the voice of dissent. So I just want to talk about what racial profiling actually means. By definition, the use of race or ethnicity as grounds for suspecting someone or having committed an offense. And the whole point behind all this, we have been at Street T taking a focus on the language of racism. I feel barriers that are keeping us as a nation or as American people from being able to relate to one another. It's kind of like unlearning racism, but from a general standpoint of understanding and compassion, of everybody's point of view. So you can't look at things one-sided. You can't sometimes go for what you've already experienced yourself to be able to have compassion or think about how that affected us, how we're still seeing those things today. Because a lot of the things that we talk about are things that are from our past, but you see them presently. They have a presence in your everyday life, things especially since, America has become so racially conscious and more leaning towards racism conscious is a better phrase that I would use to describe what is going on. One of the first things that we talk about in the Voice of Dissent is, what quote unquote was considered the slave Bible. Just to talk about it, it's kind of hard to not have any personal standpoint on such a situation, because if you're a person like me, or even a person that doesn't believe, then you believe strongly in that belief and or disbelief. You see where I'm going with this? So, I want to read this first part to you because I feel that it's very important. I mean, a lot of people have, felt a certain type of way about what happened, that we know that there was a slave Bible. It's a lot of information out there that you can read on your own if you like to about it. I just feel like it was a topic that needed to be discussed because of racial profiling. Even the Bible says that there is a time and a place for everything, but now is the time for me to speak up. And I do consider myself an unfiltered voice. I can't speak for everyone, but I speak for myself when I say white pride is dangerous. If your pride drives you to believe other people's children and family do not matter, something is wrong, unless you don't care about your own. Because if you do, then that means that you're a hypocrite. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how that opinion or how that conviction is coming across, when we're speaking to voices of dissent. Now, voice of dissent will be someone that did not necessarily agree with, Black people being able to arm themselves with the Second Amendment right. Black people, being, thought of like, okay, you're driving in your car, you have that loud music on, you must be up to something, you're doing something, something's going on. As a society, I think that a lot of things about Black people are misunderstood. They can't understand where that voice is coming from or understand how to acknowledge it without saying, okay, we know that slavery is not going on. You don't have slaves, you haven't had slaves. That's not what we're talking about. We're having a discussion about why racism still exists and why that slavery, that said slavery, affected a lot of things that are still going on today. So, when I talk about these things, it's because I'm a Christian. I am a humanitarian, but religion is a very serious subject. A lot of slaves were brought over here from, Africa, other countries, brought to islands, not only just the U.S. You know what I mean? Everyone knows this, and they were expected to, have labor for free. They were deemed, not even, human. A lot of things they had inhumane things done to them. The whole point behind me bringing up this slave Bible is just because the Voice of Dissent has spent so much time trying to control the Black masses, trying to control us like we're dangerous. We can't have our own or protect our own, because if, we have that, then God only knows what else we will do. It's just craziness. And I just feel like, any decent human being, any person that is a Christian would never have a reason to basically take away 50% of the Old Testament. Anything talking about slaves being free, you knew what you were doing, you knew what was wrong. When people make racial comments and they say, oh, we'll go back to the olden days. Listen, that is racial talk, okay? You have to understand the language that you're using when you're speaking to people in a disrespectful manner, okay? You have to understand that if you're somewhere minding your business, just because a person looks suspicious doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing something suspicious. You know what I mean? Sometimes it just takes for you to keep on moving on and mind your business. A lot of people have been making the news for, making racial comments, racially profiling Black people, people of color, because they were someplace where they've never seen them before, or they were playing music, or, they were waiting for something, or they were at a park minding their business and someone else had a problem with it. Racial profiling definitely exists. Okay. And if your beliefs or your thoughts are leading you to think that somebody is doing something wrong to you without any real probable cause, I think that you need to reevaluate why you're doing it. Okay. But let's get back to the slave Bible, like I was saying. All right. So the thing about it is that if a person chose to believe that another person had the right to vote, had the right to have their own home, had the right to have a job just as good as theirs, they would never give them a slave Bible. That was all meant to keep you complacent. And I feel that people that still believe in racism, when they talk and the things that they say is promoting that. Like, oh, to go back to the way it was, or, go back to where you came from, things like that. And it just goes back to this type of mind frame and mindset that you can't move forward. You have to be controlled, in a certain state, in a certain place. All of you live over there. Don't come over here. Don't live in my neighborhood. Don't be around me and mine. So you got to understand that. The Voice of Dissent will actually hear my voice and hear violence, because they are programmed and have for some time to think that I'm dangerous because I want to protect my home. You know what I mean? I feel like it's my right to be a gun carrier and to be be a licensed gun carrier, be a lawful gun carrier. No one's out to commit crimes. You know what I mean? And it's sad that you could think, well, anytime somebody starts talking about Black people having guns, then automatically white people tend to defend themselves, just like, we're gonna have to, make sure that they're not doing this, make sure they're not doing that. What they're gonna become dangerous. It's nobody's trying to be dangerous. All we want to do is protect what's ours. You have the same rights. We're Americans. When are you going to recognize that we are Americans? We have the same rights equally. There's going to be a crime element to every race that is out there if you call them races, if you consider them all different races of people. In my eyes, we're all people. That's how I look at things. But that's this is America. You're entitled to your opinion, and that's how it goes. But it should have never lead you to the fact where you would dehumanize another person. That's all I'm saying. I don't think that that's an appropriate way to go about things. And that was the whole point of it. To this day, the slave Bible was never, no one knows who wrote it. It was just commissioned by a certain group of people for the Negro slave, for their use. And that's what happened. One of the passages in here, um, really, it kind of, when I read it, I even put pictures in here for y'all to see a picture of the Bible, what it looked like. And it actually says on there, select parts of the Holy Bible, Negro slave, British West India Islands. So, I mean, it's definitely something to take a look at. I mean, I only included that one. I try not to put too much information into one thing because I do have a wide assortment of information that comes on any subject. But the reason why that happened, and we're getting around to my point, is because they didn't want slaves to have, and it's a dangerous word to say, like, rising up, slave revolts, things of that nature where you could not, do stuff like that. It could cost you your life, your family's life, whoever helped you. You could cost them their life. Um, but the slave Bible was commissioned on behalf of the society for the conversion of Negro slaves. Okay, it was supposed to be missionaries who wanted to teach enslaved Africans to read with the ultimate goal of introducing them to Christianity. Well, I'm a Christian, and I feel like every ounce of the Bible, should be looked at. And I believe that if you're Muslim, you will feel the same way about the Quran. I believe that, if you're whoever you are and whatever your faith is, no one else should have the right to take that away from you, even if they're converting you or, you're learning about it. So that within itself is just like how it's kind of like that thought, like, I don't want you to have all of anything. Like, I don't want you to be able to have good schools because now you got good school. You guys are homeowners. That's what it takes. You need you need tax credits from home ownership in order to put money into your school. Those taxes are the ones that go into the school money in your area, in your district. So if you live in an area where you ain't got homeowners, then you already know what the effect is going to be because what are we talking about here? It's just simple things that when you look at it, you look at how the mindset of the voice of dissent that doesn't want us to be equal, doesn't want us to rise above or be better than a slave. They'll say a lot of different things. A lot of things there's been a term that I've heard a lot, whitewashed. And with a lot of consideration in mind, you got to think about it. If you understand a lot of things, like for instance, okay, one of my favorite shows, let's take that for instance, one of my favorite shows is Spartacus, right? Now, I've watched Spartacus, I've seen the movies, I've seen about gladiators, I've learned about the Roman Empire. One of the things that I didn't understand, and it took for me to read books about this civilization, and once I started reading those, I started reading about the civilizations that they were actually conquering, the civilizations that they were actually, at war with. One of the things that I learned was that these people, it wasn't even about color back then, number one. It was about your society. So you're Roman society. If you are from Carthage, let's say, for instance, which is the person that I'm talking about, his name was Hannibal, he was from Carthage. If you wasn't Roman, then you were automatically a barbarian. So that means everybody that they ever encountered, no matter how they lived, what they were into, what things the Romans actually liked and took into their civilization, and we talk about today as their history, a lot of that comes from other civilizations that they just defeated in battle, things that they did not create. Okay, that was not part of what they do. And one of those things is the fact that they went into Carthage, which was a city that's, historically speaking, is like Africa. And these people they were the greatest enemy of Rome at that point in time. And before Spartacus ever decided to be Spartacus, I mean, because he's world renowned, everyone knows who Spartacus is. Hannibal was the first person that rose against Rome, and he was from Africa, and if you read the story that I put across and all the information I put in there, you can read about him separately. You can even see about other people in history that have led revolts, that have Haiti um, actually defeated the French in their revolution. They call it the revolution. See, everything else is Nat Turner's rebellion, the 1713 insurrection, the Baptist War, Gaspar Yagner's rebellion, Hannibal the Barbarian, the Zank rebellion. It's not a revolution until you win. And I think that Haiti paid a very high cost, and I find it funny how, like I said, things that happened before are now coming into play. And if you haven't been paying attention, a lot of Haiti's been getting a lot of attention recently in the news. People have been following up with it because of the simple fact that when they won that revolution, um, yes, they were free, but eventually the French came back and said, "Hey, with their ships at the helm, with their guns pointed at them, like, listen, uh, with their navy." You want to stay free, you want to do this, you're going to pay us, because of course they were slaves, they were working that land. That land was productive. I would say more than 70% of that land was inhabited by slaves. So it was a very productive land, and they took that. And so, the French said, okay, you want to be free, you're going to pay us this money. They paid that money for years and years and years, 100 years debt, centuries of debts that they paid to have independence. And, people were talking about why Haiti's poor, and there's been a lot of conversation about them lately because of that reason. But it all stems from that revolution that happened way back then, And so, when we start talking about slavery, everybody starts looking at it and starts thinking about it. And we realize that we have not recovered from that. It's hard enough having conversations about it when people start to immediately get defensive, and think that you're actually talking about slavery when you're talking about the language of racism and how it affects us today. And it's, people are at their dinner tables arguing with their family members about it, because it's unescapable now. We got people out in Portland risking their lives. We got women coming out, making a wall of moms to protect the protesters. Is it that the protesters are that wild and they're that outrageous speaking about, the racism and how it's affecting our country, and the people that live in our country, the injustice that they constantly and consistently see? Are they that bad for speaking about it? Or is the injustice itself that bad? And that's the thing that you really got to think about. You got to stay focused. I know that protesting is unpleasant. I know that turning on your news and every day knowing that there's going to be a problem reported on the news. Something happened last night and crime is still going on top of all of that. But you got to really look at what is the real focus of what's actually going on and being talked about. Moving right along, just so that you know, Carthage, a great city antiquity on the north coast of Africa, is now a residential suburb of the city of Tunisia. So if you're wondering how Carthage comes into play, and as far as like geographically speaking, but the things that I say, I always try to back it up with the facts, and so it makes it easier. If you guys want to dig in a little more, makes it easier for you to be able to do that and find that information for yourself. So, after that Haitian Revolution, that's when really the slave Bible came into play. And that's when, the way that slaves were treated, a lot of different things, came into play, like, postcards with, slaves being hung. That was, the norm. And I believe that the viciousness and the violence of it really happened just to keep them feeling like, hey, it's better for you to be submissive. This can get a lot worse, harder. And when you think about how that comes into play today, like, even the fact that, okay, in the paper, I have, this little meme that I had came across, and I just wanted to share it. And it was Black massacres in the United States, and it has a map on there. Okay. And you can see, like, some of these happened 2015. One of them happened 2015, 1985. It's not all 1800s, 1900s. And this massacres. So let's not act like, slavery was so far away that just because we're slaves and we've been free, it took, you know, the it takes generations to actually be able to rebuild. You know what I mean? It takes generations to actually be able to build. And not everybody, you know what I mean, is going to be able to do that. And the reason why not everybody's going to be able to do that is because they don't have generations and generations of people that, have owned homes or, have cars, have good credit or, things like that. You, you have to understand that the American dream is not to be successful for a Black man. It's to be successful and to be treated equally. So I want to talk about some more history that has been rewritten. Some things that I feel like, really should be, talk about. When you look at American history, right? And how racial profiling has affected, the Black man even after the Civil War and towards voting rights. And, of course, we just lost Representative John Lewis. What a blow, but he has served his time. Everyone knows that and respects that and acknowledges that and the things that he's done. I just seen today that he was going back across the same bridge in Selma to, his last stretch before they lay him to rest. So rest in peace to him. And, we got to acknowledge the work that he's done and, the sacrifices that he's made on behalf of these same things that we're still fighting for today. Okay. Let's touch upon some things. The thing about it is that I feel like one of the worst parts about the situation that we're having, because you hear the streets out there. Street tea. I show you the things about the protesters. We talk about that, but you hear it, you see it for yourself. And one of the things that I think that us as Americans need to do is acknowledge how racism and slavery is the racism that came from slavery is embedded in us as a society. And I don't mean like, you're walking around saying derogatory things. I mean the simple fact that you can go to school, get a full education until 12th grade, whether or not you choose to go to college, that's nothing. As big of a part of our history as slavery is, I feel like it's not taught appropriately. It's very easy for someone to be taught about slavery in school and for that very thing to be misconstrued either at home or by other people who have different beliefs like slavery is wrong. Actually, I don't even really remember being taught slavery is wrong so much as being taught slavery happened. And then being curious myself and looking, finding information that wasn't necessarily in a textbook and so many things about slavery and things that slaves went through and what their lives were like before they became slaves. And, any records that they have of that, it's like, it's kind of like saying like, oh, you got something on your chin. And then you wipe it off real quick and then it's over, because we're in public, so it's like, you can't really get into, you're not going to be like, oh my gosh, what did you eat? Why is that on your face? You know what I mean? Because then it becomes embarrassing, and it's like one of those situations, you know what I mean? Like if you've been in school and, I just want to say the United Daughters of the Confederacy, some years after the Civil War, they actually were writing books about slavery, about slaves enjoying slavery, and they were in our schools. Off the strength of that situation, knowing that our children are not being taught that that is wrong, knowing that we're all paying for our kids to go to school, and if you're not paying for your kids to go to school, then I feel like that's even more of a reason because this is affecting people of color. So I feel like, why have we never been taught appropriately about our real history about slavery? And I think that, that's something that should be looked at on not, and I can understand the sensitivity for children, but I can't understand it as far as like maybe high school or on a college level. And these are some of the things that I think about, when I write these papers and I talk about these things, and I say to myself, like, if someone would have taught me this when I was younger, if someone would have, been clear about it, would have been different. And my answer, and that's because of who I am and the mother that I had. I've never heard my mother call anybody a derogatory comment. Never. I don't, she's always been a woman of God. She loves God. Everybody knows that about her. She's not perfect. I'm not saying that she's perfect. No Christian is. If you believe in God, whatever your faith may be, that doesn't make you perfect. I'm just saying that because she's a woman of God, I know that in her heart, she doesn't look at people based on color. You know what I mean? It's, and that was something that I never learned at home. As I got older, I said, well, maybe that made me more open to, being able to be like, well, no, we can talk about this. It doesn't have to be something that's automatically a negative situation because we're talking about it. But yeah, I mean, that's something that really, I feel like I need to shed light on, and Black people need to understand, that, knowledge is power. And, being able to go to good schools and our children being able to have good schools and clean neighborhoods is very important. Home ownership is very important for the Black people. You know what I mean? And I don't think that we should have to keep experiencing situations where we can't get the things that we want to get, have to work extra hard, second, 2 and 3 jobs, or, you know what I mean? Like, the jobs that we should be able to qualify for because we have education. The education is out there to go and get. A lot of situations that affect the Black community, I can't speak upon them all as a whole. I'm just saying that I feel that the education could be better. And I feel that the fact that we are not homeowners is affecting that, because we need to be homeowners in order to have more taxes being going towards our school. But do I think that that's a part of, when people say systematic racism? I think it can be if, banks are not willing to deal with Black people as creditors, and if you're a bank that's doing that or having those practices, then yes, it's wrong. And that's racial profiling. You're saying, like, you can't be responsible for, financially, for dealing with this person based on their color. And it's wrong. So, it's just a couple of things, that whenever I think about this situation and, the teaching, how, the Bible, it's almost like, to me, like a mind control thing. Like, why do you think, like, so many Black people will say, oh, well, I don't do politics. But when you look at Black history, how many Black people have fought for the right to vote? How many Black people have been out, trying to keep, poll taxes from happening, or, these crazy tests that you have to take in order to be able to vote, and all these specifications, just like in Florida. I just heard that, if you have a fine or, anything like that, then you're not able to vote. It's kind of like limiting a lot of people being able to vote. Like, certain things, I feel like, as an American, is your right. And that's just some of the ways that I look at things, like, is it unfair? You know what I mean? Because of what reason other than color? And that's what I mean about racial profiling. So after the rewrite of history happened, I want to read you a quote on racial profiling. A socialist Robert Staples emphasizes that racial profiling in the U.S. is not merely a collection of individual offenses, but rather a systematic phenomenon across American society, dating back to the era of slavery, and until the 1950s was in some instances codified into law. Enshrinement of racial profiling ideals and United States law can be exemplified by several major periods in U.S. history. One of the phrases that stuck out the most to me was codified law. So we have a lot of conversation these days about what the actual war was even about. Like, people got the Confederate flag, and they don't understand why it's disrespectful. And I felt like I should get some information out there about that, because, the Civil War was definitely fought over the right to have slaves. However they wanted to word it today or yesterday, in the words of the people that actually stood their ground and separated themselves from the United States, because you got to remember, they separated themselves from the United States and became the Confederate States. Okay. Um, Black slavery, on the basis of white equality, was a frequent theme for slaveholders. So it's kind of like, if the slaves are free, then they're competing with white people, lower class white people, for jobs. And they felt that that was wrong. Um, they felt that it was wrong. Okay. We do not think that whites should be slaves either by law or necessity. Our slaves are Black, of another and inferior race. The status in which we have placed them is an elevation. They are elevated from the condition in which God first created them by being made our slaves. Let's First of all, we were not slaves. We lived in another country and we were free people, and we had a different life, different than what we had in the United States. So let's not forget that part. I don't. This was written by James Henry. The Cotton is King. This was something that he released. Just his thoughts on the situation. They are happy, content, unaspiring, and utterly incapable from intellectual weakness ever to give us any trouble by their aspirations. Yours are white, of your own race, you are brothers of one blood. They are your equals in natural endowment of intellect, and they feel galled by their degradation. To have to compete with a Black person for a job because they'd be free. But why would we do that when we can have free labor? Now, it's important in a situation like this to discuss what we would call Southern Unionists. Unionists. So that means basically they were from the South, but they agreed with the Union. And the Union, of course, represented the North, the Northern states. And actually, a lot of different people in some of the Southern states felt the same way. So they were called Southern Unionists. Either they didn't agree with their war for personal reasons, they didn't agree with financial reasons, they didn't agree with the law. They didn't feel like slavery needed to happen for everybody to survive. They didn't agree with that. And I just felt like those needed to be thought about, because I know when I first learned about slavery, and they always say the South, but the reality of the situation is not all of the South agreed to that. They didn't agree to that. As an African American woman, I feel like it should be said that not all white people are prejudiced, and not all white people feel a certain type of way about Black people. And that doesn't mean that they have to be in relationships with Black people, have Black children or grandchildren that feel that way. Some people just are good people, and they feel like people are people. And that's just what it is. And I feel like of all the conversation that we have about race and racial division, and I think that needs to be said. So I mean, it was a couple of counties. I mean, you guys, I don't know if you like Netflix, but I mean, on Netflix there's a movie about it. It's called The Free State of Jones, and it's actually about Jones County in Mississippi. He was actually a white unionist, and he felt that slavery was wrong, and he didn't want to fight the war, and he winded up, having some, Black people with him, and that's what they did. They fought against um, the Confederates, worked against them. For their particular purposes, because they didn't feel that it was right. And there were several of them: Winston County, Alabama, Texas Hill County, Scott County, Tennessee. So I mean, there are some of them. Now, I know that earlier today I mentioned something about codified law. So when we're talking about racial profiling, we got to look at some of the things that have happened. Okay. Now, you got to understand that slave owners literally own their slaves. Okay, they could literally do anything they wanted with them. It was, lawful. Um, you know, Lynching was lawful. It was legal. It was legal. And one of the things that you need to understand is that lynching actually did not become illegal until February. Yes, February 2020. this year on a federal level. Now, that's not to say that there was never a state or local law. I'm saying that on a federal law across the board, we're not going to discuss this. This is wrong. That didn't happen until February of 2020. So, when we talk about a lot of different things that happen in our history, we got to remember that we have not dealt with what it has done to us as a society and how it affects us every day. This is the reason why I feel like this information is important and why Street Tea is important. Because, like I said, Street Tea is about the unfiltered voice. We want to, give a voice to the people and the things that we care about. And very soon, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things that, as people, we feel like should be changed. Do we want to protest? We are protesting. And every protest ain't the same. Some protests requires research. Some protest requires an unfiltered voice speaking and speaking directly to the people, persons, parties, or places where that actual voice needs to be heard. And, here at Street Tea, we want to make sure that it's clear that we are about change. We are progressively thinking about change, change that will, make us work better, respect each other more in society as Americans. And it is about, racism, racial profiling, systematic racism, mass incarceration, all of these things, and how we can be better as a society and a better part of society. But it's also about the hindrance, because there are a lot of those out there. And we have to, systematically start to, address them and recognize them. And that's where it starts. The conversation doesn't start with slavery. The conversation starts with racism. Racism stemmed from slavery. So we're going to have to talk about slavery if we want to get past racism. I feel that that's such an uncomfortable conversation, and it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be. It doesn't need to be because modern day lynching, or so I've heard it called, is one of the things that, a lot of people refer to when they talk about all of the lives that have been lost. Lynchings happen because of a lot of laws that were in play, codified laws. Some laws were for slaves. All right. And some laws were for free people. And you got to understand which ones are which. So slave laws will be applied towards people that were still slaves. Okay. In October of 1705, Virginia passed a law stating if a master happened to kill a slave who was undergoing correction, it was not a crime. Prohibitions on gathering. How many times have you heard about, someone having a gathering or something happened and the police being called and some crazy thing happens just because the police were called, and then, someone loses their life or something like that, or being somewhere not, that you normally wouldn't be, or, the people that see you there feel like you normally would be there, or, they call the cops come, it escalates, I mean, how many situations do we hear about this? Education restrictions. It was illegal for slaves to read. There's a lot of things about our society as far as like how education goes, and how, this affects the Black community that really need to be addressed. And I think that that's something, we can touch upon that, of course, in more detail. But I'm just saying, I feel like, these things that they have, these slave laws, you can see how the Voice of Dissent, and people that do not agree, that some people just say things like Black people, they're monkeys, or they're ignorant monkeys, stuff like that, and this is what it comes from. Movement restrictions. They require any slave from their plantation or outside the cities that they reside in to have a pass signed by their master. I don't like to say it like this, but I mean, they're saying like, I've heard the quote unquote Karens of the world. You're somewhere you're not supposed to be, all of a sudden, you have this criminal element attached to you. Why? Because you're a person of color. You know what I mean? This is where this mindset come from. They're dangerous. They're going to do something. There's somewhere they're not supposed to be. They shouldn't even be able to do that. That's not their right. You know, this is where that mindset comes, the voice of dissent. Slave patrols. In the slave dependent portions of North America, varying degrees of legal authority backed patrols by plantation owners and other free whites to ensure that enslaved people were not free to move about at night and to generally enforce the restrictions on slaves. Slave patrols is what they call them. And we now refer to them as lynching. You see them, grab them, do what you're going to do to them, lynch them, hang them, cut them, beat them. You know, it was just an all out whatever, you know, and it's sad. And, you know, and there was no justice for it then. And even now, if it happens, you know, you want to stop talking about slavery, but you got to question it when we're now having protests. How many days have we been having protests? Does anybody keep account? How many days we got protests? That's equal in months about police brutality. Do you think that's a coincidence? After all this time? Surely you cannot believe that when you know the facts, when you know the history. And this is what I mean about learning about slavery and about what it really is about, understanding the beast and the way that its claws work and has digged into our society so that we can alleviate it, not quiet it down, not shut it down, alleviate it, get it uprooted and out of our society, because it's a very negative connotation, not because it's our history, because it's our present. You can't deny that anymore. Denial is not an option. So here at Street TV, we want to be very clear about that. They will deny equal political rights, the right to vote, the right to attend public schools, the right to equal treatment under the law. Some of the northern states repealed such laws around the same time that the Civil War ended and the slavery abolished by constitutional amendment. Now, the defining feature of the Black Codes was a broad vagrancy law, which allowed local authorities to arrest free people for minor infractions and commit them to involuntary labor. This period was the start of the convict lease system, also described as slavery by another name. Why would any American be in jail for years and put in solitary confinement for stealing a book bag? If you haven't heard about the Khalif Broder story, that was another one that made a lot of headlines. But I mean, I could name so many, just stuck inside of our justice system right now. Right now, you got to really look at the language of racism and what it is doing to our country, how it's affecting us as Americans in the everyday life of people of color. Denial is not an option anymore. As of February 26, 2020, the Senate finally passed the Emmett Till Anti-Lynching Act. Now, I know you're trying to figure out, if you haven't already heard who Emmett Till is, who is he? Emmett was a 14-year-old African-American boy from Chicago, Illinois, who was beaten and mutilated to death in Mississippi in 1955. Now, I am 40 years old. I was born in 1979. This is where we got to understand the nature of the beast and how it is still present. If Emmett had lived, he would be 64 years old today. Now, I want you all to think about what times he was living in This was 1955. If you're like me, most of our parents were born in that era. We are literally one generation away from Emmett Hill. And we got all these dead bodies that keep piling up. And nobody wants to talk about the language of racism that stemmed from slavery, that is still happening in our actions, our thoughts, and our speech every single day. Yes, it's uncomfortable, but until we can do that, how can we fix this problem? If Emmett had lived, he would be 64 years old today. I mean, I really feel like that's something to really think about, which we can argue. He would have at least 10 more years of life to live, because you got to think about it. The average life of American is 74 years old. Life expectancy. So if Emmett would still be alive today, isn't it safe to assume that the racism, hate, and bigotry that took his life, that we have just now passed the law on in February of 2020, is enough for us to take a look, a deeper look, a down depth, way beneath the surface look at what the language of racism really is and how it looks in our society every day. Now, I just want to thank you all for coming out with me this evening. I know it's Sunday, everybody's probably getting ready for the week. Here at Street Tea, we appreciate you. We thank you for your time. If you guys didn't miss the broadcast, I just want to let you know that Street Tea is now going to be under construction until further notice. We're going to be under construction, and I will be posting some things about that, and why we're going to be under construction and how long it's going to take us, and certain things that you guys can still do to interact, not only on the page, also in the groups that we have on Facebook as well as on Tumblr. We want to stay in touch while Street Tea is under construction. We got a lot of great things coming for y'all. We want to clean Street Tea up, make her look good. So when you guys are sharing her to your family members and your friends, your co-workers, or whatever, everybody that's out there that's watching, I just want to thank you for coming out and sharing this time with us. We'll have more to come, but for right now, if you got time, check out the Voices of Dissent. It was a pleasure getting that information to y'all. I hope you guys appreciate it. Just go out and show some love. And as always, here at Street Tea, be blessed and be the blessing. Take care. Good night.